The night passed peacefully as Nam didn't try to do anything. Shiro did accidentally scare the living crap out of Ras as he forgot they had a guest huddled in the corner, but they managed to resolve it without waking up his father. When morning came, Nam cooked up another meal before Shiro left. Thanking the father and son duo, Shiro left the cabin and made her way back to the city so that she could attend the public lesson that the teacher was hosting. After all, he was a good source of information at this moment in time. Waiting by the school patiently, she could see a few parents frown at her but eventually ignored her presence. Some of them made their disgust known by saying lines such as, "They really do let anyone participate, huh? If it wasn't for free, I wouldn't even want my child to be near a beggar like her." To which Shiro would only shrug and ignore them. After all, it's not like they were going to leave this village anytime soon and live a better life now. She knows how it usually goes. She shows them her power. They beg for forgiveness. It's better to spare herself of the trouble. After waiting for a little while, Shiro could see the teacher approaching in the distance. Standing up, she greeted him when he got close. "You seem eager to learn." He chuckled softly. "I require knowledge after all. Without knowledge, you can't do anything." Shiro nodded her head, smiling at her response. He gestured for everyone to enter the building. Some of the parents started to complain to him about Shiro's presence, but he ignored them. The classroom was rather poor as it was just some benches lined up with no desks. There was a chair at the front and a slab of dark gray stone, which had several pieces of burnt branches set to the side so that he could draw on the slab. Today we'll be learning about this world and the trials that are located everywhere across this land. Since we have a new student joining us, I'll go over some of the things that we already know. First, our world is called the Forgotten Realms as stated on the mural of beginnings. It is split into 5 sections, each representing one of the primordial deities: Nyx, Gaia, Uranus, Tartarus, and Kronos. Each section is filled with cities and unique environmental scenarios which are due to the god's power. In the section of night, which houses the Tower of Nyx, day is much shorter than the other areas and beasts roam the night. The closer you get to the tower, the more powerful the beasts become, and some say that the beasts located at the entrance can't be defeated even by those who have obtained 3 divinities. But how are you supposed to complete her tower then? One of the kids interrupted as the teacher sighed. It's supposed to be hard. If it was easy, everyone could obtain the powers of a deity and turn this world asunder. Anyways, I shall resume my lesson now, he explained while using the charcoal to draw out a rough diagram of the world. The next section of life, which houses the Tower of Gaia. It is located in the west where plants and wildlife are in abundance in this section. The closer you get to the tower, the denser the forest becomes. The monsters here are mostly harmless and won't try to kill anyone. People who hunt the monsters are then punished by the forest itself. The forest will drain you of your vitality in order to balance out the life of which you took. Therefore, if you ever find yourself in the section of life, do not kill any of the inhabitants or else your life is forfeit. The third section is located near the north is the section of sky. Most of the land mass in this place are broken apart and float freely in the air while maintaining a certain distance from one another. There are times where the islands come close to colliding, but they never do. After studying the patterns of the islands, some have managed to construct a few bridges that join together when the islands are close and allow safe passage. There are also air channels scattered through the section that act like air carriages which carry your body with a gust of air. The safe channels are marked while the dangerous ones are guarded by enforcement so that people don't accidentally harm themselves. The fourth section is located in the east, and it's the section of the underworld, one that has the Tower of Tartarus. This place is one that you should avoid whenever possible as it is filled with criminals and large monsters that attack everyone. Occasionally, things called Wardens of Tartarus will appear, but people don't know what they do as all who run into them have disappeared without any exceptions. They are only rumors, but the disappearing people are real. The last and final section is the section of time. This section is smaller than the others in that it is squashed between the section of life and the section of the underworld. The flow of this place is rather weird as there are instances where you would find yourself back to where you were a few moments ago or where you could have been if you kept walking. There's not much known about this place as it is hard to investigate the flow of time, but people have been able to map out a rather safe route to the tower. Thankfully, There aren't any monsters in this section, and you can live your life there. If you want with some small problems, but they're not too bothersome. As the lesson continued, Shiro made sure to memorize everything. During the second half of the lesson, the teacher started to talk about where they are and what trials are near this place. Right now, they're in the outer edges where the influence of each section is minimal. The closer you get to the towers, the more apparent the influence becomes. The closest tower to their current location would be the Tower of Nyx, and the closer they get to the center, the longer the night becomes. After the lessons ended, Shiro decided to ask the teacher some more questions. Seeing as though Shiro was entirely focused during the lesson, he agreed. A and B. Do you know where the trials belonging to Heracles and Achilles are located? Shiro asked curiously. I do, but they're rather difficult trials. Most would take them as their second or third divinity. Seeing as you are still young, can I guess that you're looking for your first divinity? He asked as Shiro nodded. I have something I need to do, so the first one must be as strong as it can get. Shiro replied. I see. In that case, then I don't recommend Heracles or Achilles since their trials are tough. There's no way that you can complete them without a single divinity. He shook his head. Then what's the most powerful trial that you can recommend? Shiro asked. I don't know since I don't know about your current abilities. You're malnourished and wounded. Any trial is dangerous for you. Amen. Then can you tell me about the most notable trials for a first trial? If possible, can it be something combat-based or utility-based? Shiro asked. Okay, let me look through my notes. The teacher nodded and started to flip through his notes. There are a few that I've found, and probably the most noticeable one is Perseus. His divinity is a mix of utility and weapons, and it grants you a small armory of weapons of which you can summon at will, but must replenish manually. Depending on how well you did his trial, the divinity may also grant you some physical benefits such as increased strength, speed, vitality, and the such. If you want a strength-based divinity, then Theseus might be one of them. Think of it like a weaker version of Heracles' divinity. Thinking back to their legends, Shiro knew that Perseus was the one who killed Medusa thanks to some of the items granted by the Greek gods. A magical helmet, a shield, the winged shoes of Hermes, a magical bag, and a powerful sword which allowed him to cut through Medusa's hard neck. On the other hand, Theseus slayed the Minotaur without any tools from the gods. Perseus' legend was similar to Theseus, only that he needed the weapons as Medusa was a tricky foe and was more powerful than Minotaur. There are a few harder trials that might be completable without a divinity, but it hasn't been proven yet. The goddess of speed, strength, and victory, Nike, also known as the winged goddess. The god of strength and power, Kratos. Hermes is also one of them. So I have a choice between Perseus, Theseus, Nike, Kratos, and Hermes, huh? Shiro asked just to make sure. Yes, these are probably the most powerful ones that you can complete without a divinity. Probably is the key word. The teacher nodded. Narrowing her eyes, Shiro started to consider her options. Looking over her options, Shiro couldn't help but glance at Nike and wonder if that goddess was the proper choice. After all, she represented speed, strength, and victory. With her identity known as the winged goddess, there was the possibility of her receiving flight as well, which was very helpful. Thinking back to a certain sports brand back on Earth, Shiro couldn't help but wonder if she would receive the divinity called Just Do It. Can you tell me more about Nike's divinity? Shiro asked, as she was probably one of her best choices. After all, the fact that she'll gain access to flight will make things along easier. While her divinity is similar to that of Athena's, you get more of her power the more trials you complete. In her tower, I completed the trial of wisdom, but nothing else for Athena, so I was only granted the divinity of wisdom. If one completes more of her trials, they will receive the divinity of Athena instead of just a branch. It's similar with Nike. You'll need to complete the trials of speed, strength, battle, and flight. Hearing this, Shiro found herself more interested with Goddess Nike's divinity, as the amount of utility that it provides is more impressive than the other divinities. Perseus granted her an armor and increased strength, but the armor had to be replenished by her manually, while Theseus and Kratos only granted her physical strength. What about Hermes' divinity? Shiro asked, as Hermes could also fly, but he was faster than any other god/goddess. For Hermes, I'm thinking that you can only complete a portion of his Trials without divinity, since the strain of his agility far exceeds what a mortal body can handle. For Hermes, most would choose him as their second divinity after their body has been upgraded by the first. If you were to choose him as your first divinity, you would probably only get some improvements to your body, some increased reflexes, and better vitality. The teacher replied with a shake of his head. In terms of difficulty, Hermes and Kratos' trials are harder than Nike's, while Nike's trials are harder than Perseus and Theseus. Out of these five, you should probably choose Nike if you're confident. Her divinity is better than what people normally choose for their first, while worse than what people choose for their second. So it's an exceptional first divinity, but lesser than average second divinity? Shiro raised her eyebrows. Exactly. Where is it located? Shiro asked. It's located in the section of sky, towards the north. You can find where the trial is, as there are maps around each city, but the problem for you is getting there. If you want to walk there, I'm afraid it may take 3 months or more without taking into consideration the dangers you may face while getting there. And that's considering if you take a straight path. The main difficulty for you is getting to the trial, along with whether or not you have the strength to actually attempt it. After all, Nike's trial does put a burden on your body. Looking at your current state, the chances are not high. He shook his head after seeing how malnourished Shiro was. More than 3 months, huh? Shiro muttered. Since she had a year to complete the first trial, it was okay if it took 3 months. The problem was the dangers she'd faced during this time. It'll take around 3 months for her current wounds to heal at an average pace, and that's considering if she doesn't do anything too drastic. If she had to fight, it'll take longer than 3 months. Hell, she might even get more injuries on the way there. Seeing Shiro frown, the teacher shook his head. The most I can do for you is give you a map towards the trial of Nike. Though if you spend some time to do some work, you can probably pay for a few carriage rides from city to city. That'll take you to the tower twice as fast, but it costs quite a bit of money. Will you be going to the section of sky this year? Shiro asked as she had an idea. Yes, I am. I travel across the world every year so that I can spread the knowledge. However, I had already visited the section of sky a few months ago, so it'll take at least 9 months before I visit there again. 9 months. That's around 274 days in this place and around 11 days or so outside. Can I work as your assistant and join you on your journey? It'll be easier than going to the section of sky alone, since who knows what kind of danger I may run into. Shiro suggested, as this was probably one of the safer options. The only downside to this was time, but thanks to the time dilation in this place, she was fine with it. You work as my assistant? He raised his eyebrows. Yes, I can show you my capabilities. Tell me everything you want to teach in tomorrow's lesson, and I can deliver that lesson for you. You can watch by the side to make sure that everything is correct if you don't believe me. Looking at the dedication in her eyes, the man was rather surprised. However, he still shook his head. Just reciting the information isn't enough. If you really want to be my assistant, you'll need to memorize everything and thoroughly understand the contents. I am confident with my memory and knowledge can be gained over time. Staying silent, the teacher sighed. I'll be staying in this town for a while anyways, so I'll give you a chance. In this time, you will act as my assistant. You will get no pay. You will get no help from me. If you are able to overcome all of it and still want to be my assistant, by the end of my time in this town, then I shall take you along with me. I will promise to the gods that I will take you to the section of sky should you pass. He offered as Shiro nodded her head. Arno, may I know your name? My name is Demos, but you will address me as sir if you are to be my assistant. Demos asked. Shiro is my name. Shiro replied. In that case, arrive here early in the morning and prepare for lessons. I'll allocate more tasks to you over the course of this time, such as preparing the charcoal and cleaning the slab, so that you may show me your reliability. Demos smiled. Nodding her head, Shiro left the building. With her current state, having a guarantor like Demos was helpful, and traveling with him will allow her to learn more about this world. During this, she may find a trial that was more suitable for her other than Nike, so long as he doesn't make her do outrageous things as an assistant. She will help him until they reach the section of sky. If he does, well, let's just say that he's not going to be waking up the next morning. Making her way to the forest, she figured that she should probably go hunt something for dinner. She had already troubled Nam and Ras for a night of shelter and food, so she'll need to procure her own tonight. Looking down at her wounded thigh, she figured that sneak attacks and small movements were her best bet right now if she didn't want to make her wounds worse. So annoying. I'm used to my monstrous regeneration, and I forgot how annoying it was to plan for a fight while still being wounded. Shiro thought with a sigh and walked into the forest, pressing her fingers against her throat. She did a few tests to make sure the tone of her voice was correct. Ah. Once she got the tone and pitch that she wanted, she narrowed her eyes and took a deep breath. Copying a roar of the turka, she waited a few moments for any replies, and sure enough, she heard a few deep in the forests, giving her a general idea on where they were. Since it was not a good choice to fight the older ones, she picked out on one that sounded relatively young and had a higher pitch. Pulling out her bone dagger and bone short sword, Shiro smiled at the thought of dinner. Shiro managed to kill the turka without much problems as it was still young. All she had to do was to spring a surprise attack on the young monster, and it would be dead. However, she needed to be careful as the spikes could still harm her. Looking at the dead turka with the bone short sword and dagger sticking out of his head, Shiro sighed in relief and started to carry his corpse away. The best that she could do right now was to set up a camp near the edge of the forest and sleep on one of the trees. If she set up camp in the forest, there was a high chance that the monsters could discover her, dragging the corpse, which was a little smaller than her. Shiro started to skin the hide off its body along with cutting up the meat so that it could be cooked easier. Setting the wasted materials such as the organs to the side, Shiro made a quick fire with some dry branches and started to cook the meat. While it was cooking, she started to sharpen the bones into small daggers so that she could have some ranged weaponry if they were needed, though that was highly unlikely should she succeed in becoming Demo's assistant. However, you never know what life would throw at you, so it was good to make some backup plans. After she ate the meat to fill herself for the night, Shiro checked up on her current equipment. I have a short sword and 5 daggers now. I should probably make a belt or something so that I can store them under my hide cloak. It's also annoying if I have to carry these around by hand as well, she thought to herself. Threading some tendons through a strip of hide, Shiro created a holster of sorts for each of the daggers and wrapped it around her waist. With her daggers and short sword ready to be grabbed at any moment, Shiro nodded her head with satisfaction. Taking it off for now, Shiro climbed to the top of a tree and hung the belt on one of the branches as she didn't want to be accidentally stabbed in her sleep. Grabbing her short sword, she kept it by her side in case something tried to attack her. Waking up early the next day, Shiro cooked up some of the leftover meat and started to make her way back into the city. Thinking about it for a moment, Shiro decided to take a small detour to the butcher's and see if she could work something out with the owner there. That way, she could earn herself some money from the monsters that she hunts. Due to her scouting on the first day, she had an idea on the layout of the town, and the butcher's was located in the center of the town. After walking for a bit, she could hear the butcher's cutting up some meat for the morning. "Excuse me," Shiro called out. "Morning. Are you looking for some meat?" the butcher asked with a smile. "No, I'm just asking if you can buy some of the monsters I hunt for some food. To my knowledge, turkas are the most common monsters, right? If I hunt them and bring it to you, can you buy them off me?" Shiro asked as the butchers thought about it for a moment. "Excellent. I don't know, young lady. I'm already buying monsters from a few people." He apologized. I don't mind if you give me a little less in terms of pay. I just want to sell this since I can't eat the whole monster in a day," Shiro offered. "I usually buy whole turkas for 15 coppers. If they're not whole, I'll buy them for 10 coppers. If you really want to sell me turkas, I'll buy whole ones for 12 coppers, and if they're not whole, I'll buy them for 7 coppers. The butcher offered. "What would you class as not whole? Because I also want to keep some of the meat to feed myself," Shiro asked. I'll show you." Grabbing one of the turka corpses that he had already prepared, he told her about the best meat and which is worth the most on the corpse. "If these are missing, I'll deduct some copper if that's okay." "Yeah, that's fine. When shall I bring you the corpses?" "I have lessons in the day, and I hunt at night for dinner and breakfast," Shiro asked. "You can bring it here at night then. I'll wait for you to bring me the monster body." The butcher smiled. "Are you sure? If you want, I can also bring it too. Somewhere convenient for you," Shiro asked. "No, it's fine. I'm here most of the day anyways," he replied with a laugh. "Thank you very much. Can I know your name?" Shiro smiled. "Just call me Vasil." "What's your name, young lady?" Vasil asked with a smile. "Shiro." After talking to the butcher for a little longer, Shiro started to make her way back to the school. Looking at the sun, Shiro figured that Demos still needed around an hour or so till he arrived at the school. I should probably clean up the school a little since I have the time. She thought to herself, ####, cleaning the dust out of the classroom. Shiro nodded her head with a small smile and climbed out the window. Waiting by the door, she saw more parents show up. Oi, what were you doing inside the classroom without anyone around? One of the parents asked with a glare. I was cleaning up. Shiro replied simply. I don't believe it. A beggar like you wouldn't clean up. You must have done something suspicious or you stole something. She frowned and reached out to grab Shiro's arm. What are you doing? Shiro narrowed her eyes and stepped out of her reach. Seeing that Shiro avoided her grab, the woman seemed enraged, reaching out for her once more. The woman was not gentle with her actions at all. Seeing this, Shiro knew that she probably shouldn't act nice with someone like this. Brushing her cloak to the side, she revealed her set of daggers. Grabbing her short sword, Shiro used it to parry her grab to the side. Don't act violently in a place of learning, Shiro warned. Glaring at her, the woman was now seething with rage. You little sh**t. Stop. What are you doing this early in front of the school? Demos shouted out with a frown. This little beggar was doing something suspicious. In the school, she even threatened me with the sword. The woman explained while glaring at Shiro. Is that true? Demos turned to Shiro. No. I was cleaning up the classroom and the woman tried to violently grab me. I was protecting myself with the sword. Shiro replied coldly. If Demos couldn't see right from wrong, then she wasn't going to bother with him. Furrowing his brows, Demos decided to look inside the window and saw that the classroom was indeed clean. He also understood that some of the parents here were a little unhappy with Shiro due to the fact that she looked like a beggar, so there was a high chance that they're blaming Shiro for any reason they can find. Miss Averos, can you conduct yourself a bit better? They're all here studying about the world, and you're causing trouble for no reason. Unless you can behave yourself, I'm afraid you'll have to take your son and leave. I won't tolerate acts like this. Demos narrowed his eyes at the woman. Whatever. Your lessons are a waste of time anyways. She huffed and left the area with her son. Seeing this, Demos shook his head. Thank you for cleaning up the room. He smiled and patted Shiro on the shoulder. Raising her eyebrow, Shiro glanced down at her shoulder and shrugged. Following behind him, Shiro stood near his seat at the front as she was acting as his assistant. During the lesson, he would ask her to draw out some of the maps she had seen yesterday, and Shiro managed to draw them with amazing accuracy. Seeing this, Demos couldn't help but be surprised at her memory. Little did he know, copying something from her database was easy for Shiro. Looking at the slab, she could almost overlay the same image from her memory, and all she needed to do was to trace over the image. Continuing the lesson with Shiro drawing all of the maps and diagrams that he had wanted to draw. Demos had a much easier time teaching and managed to teach more information than what he normally could, as Shiro managed to draw all of the diagrams that he needed quickly. Once lessons were over, Demos was quite impressed. Good job today. Demos smiled and left the building. Chuckling softly, Shiro started to make her way to the forest. She'll be trying to hunt one more turka than needed so that she could get more money from Vasil. For the next week or so, Shiro repeated the process of helping Demos in the school and hunting for Vasil to earn some money. Thankfully, turka were quite common in the forest, so Shiro didn't need to worry about running out of food. They were also rather active in reproduction, so there was always an abundance of turka. In addition to this, since she had been hunting every day and eating a hearty meal both at night and in the morning, she was looking less malnourished and her body started to return to normal. During this time, she had also gotten used to working around her wounds. So the hunts became easier over time. While there were still a few parents that were displeased with her, some have opened up to her and even gave her some snacks that they had made to eat in a short while. Shiro made herself known in the town as a hard-working girl who was the teacher's assistant and a competent hunter. Vasil also decided to return the price back to normal once he saw how many turka she could hunt without fail. However, she still slept in a tree as she couldn't afford a house, but she wasn't too bothered since she was used to sleeping outside. Today was her second week working as Demos' assistant, and she was currently preparing the classroom for the next lesson. Strangely enough, Demos was arriving much later than usual today, and Shiro had to usher the students in and conduct the lesson herself. Since she remembered what Demos had wanted to teach today, it wasn't that hard to conduct a lesson in his stead. Once the lessons were over, Shiro started to tidy up, placing the notes on a makeshift wooden table that she had made. Shiro sat near the window and glanced out at the sky. He's taking a while to get here. Usually he should have arrived a few hours ago. Did something happen to him? Shiro muttered with a frown. Shaking her head, Shiro was about to leave when he heard the sound of horses in the distance. Raising her eyebrow, she watched as a horse carriage stopped in front of the school, seeing Demos hop off the carriage with a bag. Shiro paused with mild surprise. "Welcome back, sir. How come you were away today? I had to conduct the lesson in your place," Shiro asked, poking her head out of the window. Thank you for that. I was collecting something that I had ordered from another town. They ran into some trouble, so I had to go quickly. I trusted you to conduct the lesson in my place, and you didn't disappoint me." Demos chuckled. "Naturally. I have already memorized all the lessons that you wanted to cover, so it wasn't hard." Shiro shrugged with a smug expression. "Don't feel too complacent since it's a bad trait to have." Demos chuckled. "Well, that's true." Shiro grinned. Seeing the grin on his assistant that had made his life easier, Demos shook his head with a soft smile. "So what did you even go out to get? You didn't give me a notice." Shiro asked. "I couldn't give you a notice since I didn't know where you live. But here, it's a small present, I suppose." Demos smiled and gave her the bag. Raising her eyebrow, Shiro looked into the bag and saw that it was a set of clothes that was neatly folded. "I've seen you wear the same set of clothes and cloak every day, so I figured that you should probably have a different outfit. Plus, it'll be easier for you when we get into other cities since you know how people react to beggars." Demos smiled. "Well, it doesn't really bother me, but thank you. I'll go get changed now, I suppose." Shiro chuckled. Making her way inside the building, she made sure that no one could see her and changed into the outfit that Demos had bought her. After getting changed, Shiro had to admit that the outfit was well made and it was quite comfortable. It was a little big for her body as her stature was on the smaller side, but it wasn't a problem. It was cute. The outfit consisted of a black shirt, a white jacket with long black sleeves, and a black skirt that extended to her ankles. In the bag was also a pair of shoes that were much better than what she was currently wearing. Unfortunately, there was nowhere that she could use to store her weapons, so she could only carry them in the bag. "So how is it?" Demos asked with a smile after seeing Shiro walk out in the outfit. "It's great." "How much was it?" Shiro asked. "You don't have to pay me. Think of it as my payment for helping me out these days." "How are your wounds, by the way?" "I also bought some ointment for you," Demos asked while pulling out a box from his bag. "They're healing. As long as I don't overexert myself while fighting, it should be healed in a month or so," Shiro replied while tapping her hand over her thigh. After all, that's where her biggest wound was. If she wasn't so malnourished and weak at that point, she could have avoided this unnecessary damage. "A month or so, huh? It'll probably have healed when we move to the next town." That reminds me, where do you live?" "I don't know, so it was kind of hard to tell you about me having to leave." Demos asked. I don't have a house. I've just been camping in the forest," Shiro replied. It's a bit uncomfortable, but I got used to it. The trick is to find the right tree to sleep on. If you're curious, I can show you where I live." Shiro chuckled, nodding his head dumbfoundedly. Demos waited for Shiro to lead the way. Leaving the school, Shiro made her way to the forest with Demos following behind her. "This is the tree that I've been sleeping in for the last 2 weeks or so. There's the campfire where I cook the monsters that I've hunted," Shiro said while gesturing to her home. "Wait, how do you keep yourself clean then?" Demos asked as she didn't smell like she had been living in the wild. Normally, one would smell like blood or dirt if they had been living in the wild, but Shiro wasn't like that. "There's a large pool of water if you go deeper into the forest. I clean myself and dress my wounds there," Shiro explained. Nodding his head, Demos walked slightly further into the forest and saw that there were quite a few signs of combat, such as cracks in the trees. "Be careful. I've set up a few traps for Turkus," Shiro reminded. "What do you mean?" Demos asked with confusion. Throwing one of her daggers towards one of the bushes, bone spikes that were attached to one of the branches dropped down with a hefty thud against the ground. "This pins the Turka down on the ground and makes it easier for me to kill the Turka," Shiro explained while resetting the trap. staying silent. Demos couldn't believe that this was how she had been living for the past week. He had thought that she had a room or something to live in as she kept herself relatively clean, but no, she had been living in the forest. Do you want to live with me? I have a spare room. Demos offered with a forced smile. No, it's fine. It's easier for me to live here and hunt the turka. Plus, I'm saving up some money so that I can afford to rent a room if we move to a new town since it's probably harder to hunt the monsters closer to the sections. Shiro shrugged. That is true. The monsters on the edge of this place are easy to kill, while those inside require a strength-based divinity. Demos nodded. How about we make a house then? There's plenty of wood here, so you can probably make a house if you want it. He asked. I mean, we'll probably be leaving soon, so there's no point. Don't worry about it, sir. I can look after myself. Shiro chuckled. After talking to Shiro for a little longer, Demos walked back to his own home and sat on the chair. Resting his elbows on his table, he sighed. What the hell? He muttered and massaged his eyes. With Shiro's new outfit, some of the parents were more accepting of her, and even the students started to enjoy her lessons after her first stand-in. There were a few times where Demos would let Shiro do the lessons so that he could take a break. Plus, the students enjoyed it, and he knew that when one enjoys something, they learn better. With Shiro being a substitute teacher, more and more students started to come to the school. Some were around her age while others were slightly older. After finishing the lesson, Shiro gave the students a small wave. Asterisk sigh. I wonder if I should try to make some glasses so that I look more like a teacher. She mused to herself in mild humor. What do you mean by glasses? Demos asked curiously. Oh, nothing. It's just a device to help one's eyesight if they're damaged. One can also use it to look smart. Shiro shrugged. I can see the first use, but why the second? Demos raised his eyebrows. You'd be surprised. Shiro chuckled. Anyways, setting that aside, we'll be leaving town in a week, so you should make some preparations with your home. Grab anything you want to take with you, and we'll leave by carriage. Wait in a week's time? Let me think. Damn, I've already been here for a month and a half. Shiro raised her eyebrow in mild surprise. Yes, and you've also become more open in this time. Demos chuckled. At the start, Shiro was a little reserved and wouldn't speak much other than help out, but now she was more proactive. A good sign in his eyes. Well, I trust you a little more now, so. Shiro shrugged. Cold-hearted. Did you not trust me at the start? Demos laughed. Nope. I'm just a weak and delicate girl trying to find a divinity. I had no money and no home, so everything had to be done with caution. Does a weak and delicate girl make a living from killing Turco with ease despite being wounded? Demos asked with a smile. This one does. Shiro grinned and pointed at herself. Haha. Anyways, take care on your way home, I suppose. We'll notify the students tomorrow. Demos smiled as Shiro nodded. After notifying the students the next day, some of the younger ones became sad hearing that Shiro will be leaving. This made the lessons a little harder to conduct, but Shiro let it be since she had a soft spot for these kids. Asking Demos permission to play around with the students for the day instead of continuing the lesson, Shiro had some fun doing a few crafts with them, such as trying to carve something from wood. A few of them tried to carve her, but to no avail. Though the attempts were rather cute in Shiro's eyes, spending the rest of the week trying to teach them as much as she could, the day of departure finally arrived. I'm gonna miss you bringing turkas to my store every night. Vasil laughed since Shiro had been a great help. I'm sure plenty of hunters will take my place. Shiro smiled. I suppose, but they're not you. Take this and stay safe on your journey, okay? Be careful since turkas are one of the weakest monsters. Vasil chuckled and gave her a short sword that was wrapped in a hide sheath. Since she had been using bone as her weapons, she had to replace them constantly. Now that she had a metal sword, hunting was definitely going to be easier. How much do I owe you? Shiro asked while taking the sword with a grateful smile. While she did earn some money to buy a sword, she had opted against using it to buy weapons for the time being, as the bones were enough. She wanted to save the money for inns and travel just in case something had happened. Reno Epsilon, now that Vasil had gifted her a sword, she might as well pay for it. It's on the house. Just make sure you survive out there, okay? If you can't get a divinity, my store is always open for another hunter. Vasil smiled. I'll keep that in mind. Shiro nodded. After bidding farewell to a few others that she had met in her time here, she sat inside the carriage. Have you finished saying goodbye? Demos asked with a smile. Yup. So where are we going now? We're going to be taking the carriage inland to the section of life, where I'll be teaching in a slightly bigger town than this place, though it's not on the size of a city yet. However, teaching is secondary there as I am tasked with something else. There had been severe lack of nourishment in the land around this town, and since I have the divinity of wisdom, they want to ask me to find out the cause. They have already tried to ask someone with the divinity of harvest, but the problem persisted, which led them to believe that something else is at work. Demos explained. Oh, so you're doing some detective work. You're like Sherlock, and I'm kind of like a badass version of Watson. Shiro grinned. I do not know the people you speak of, nor do I know about this detective work. But we are to investigate the cause. You'll be teaching the lessons in my stead while I investigate. I have an old friend in the town, and he owns the school, so we can teach one of the classes they have there. So if I wasn't around, you would have needed to do both. Shiro raised her eyebrow. Somewhat. I would have probably set teaching aside, as the lack of nutrients in the land is the biggest concern. Demos shook his head. So it's good that you took me as your assistant. And you were against it at the start too. Shiro chuckled. Well, if I have someone incompetent as my assistant, I might as well not have one to begin with. It's better not to teach at all than to spread false information. Demos shook his head. True. So how long will it take us to get to this town? The town of Egina is around 2 weeks' worth of travel from our current location, since we're on the edge of the section of night, and Egina is in the section of life. It's not on the edge, nor is it deep in the section of life, so the monsters and the influence of the tower is pretty weak. Still be careful though, since as I have covered in my lessons, if you kill an animal inside, the forest will try to drain you. The pursuit isn't as strong near the edge, but it should still be dangerous for someone like you. Demos warned. I see. So in these 2 weeks, I suppose I'm allowed to hunt a little so that we can get some food? Shiro asked, as she was quite interested to see how well this short sword can cut. Yes, as we are still in the section of night. Demos nodded. Great. If you don't mind me, I'll be sitting on the top of the carriage so that I can get some fresh air and see the world with my own eyes, okay? Shiro asked as Demos sighed. Sure. Grinning slightly, Shiro grabbed the top of the window hole and swung herself to the top of the carriage in one swift movement. This girl is not ladylike at all. Demos shook his head with a small smile. However, it wasn't too bad to be around someone lively like her. ####, sitting on the roof of the carriage, Shiro watched the town disappear into the distance and couldn't help but wonder about her friends once more. She had already spent almost 2 months in this place now, and she was still nowhere near the trial that she wanted to complete. Hell, after the Tower of Nike, she still needed to complete the 5 primordial trials, and God knows what was in there. Literally, I'm sure they're doing fine. Shiro thought with a smile. However, she couldn't help but feel a little lonely. Thinking back to it, she was glad that she made friends with Lyrica when they first met. If she continued by herself as a monster, life would be rather dull. Shaking her head, she laid on the roof and looked up at the sky. Thinking about it for a moment, Shiro decided to pop her head back down. Say, I have a question. Go on. Demos looked up at Shiro. Has anyone tried to venture further beyond the edge of this place? Like, the town that we were just in is located around the edge of the section of night, right? Has anyone tried to continue further down south? Shiro asked. In fact, there has. There had been several expeditions launched for them to explore the world. However, after a certain point, all life ceases to exist. There is no nutrient in the soil, no monsters, no animals, no humans. The longest ever expedition recorded was venturing out for half a year, which caused severe losses to manpower, but they were unable to discover anything. Demos shook his head, seeing some sadness in his eyes. Shiro knew that it might be a touchy subject, so she stayed silent and let Demos have some alone time. After traveling for the entire day, Shiro, Demos, and the carriage driver started to set up for camp. They were currently beside the road with some woods next to them. Unfortunately, there didn't seem to be any monsters or animals that she could hunt, but Demos had anticipated such an occurrence and had brought some rations and ingredients they could use to make a small meal. After eating the meal, Shiro looked up at the sky and saw that the moon had already risen. I'll keep watch for the night in case anything decides to attack us, Shiro said as Demos nodded his head. Sure. After a few hours, wake me up and I'll take the next watch, Demos said while setting up a few bedrolls, looking around for a decent tree to sit on. Shiro sat on the sturdiest branch and kept an eye out on her surroundings. Around 2 hours into her watch, something strange started to happen. Small motes of light started to flicker on and off around her surroundings. Understanding that these were an existence that was similar to spirits, Shiro smiled and reached out for one of the motes. Landing on her finger, the mote of light danced for a little while before fading away. The closer we get to the towers, the more their influence shows. Since we're still in the section of night, the night will start to become longer during our travels, meaning we'll have to be careful since the beasts are more proactive around this time. Shiro mused to herself while playing around with the motes of light, watching these motes dance around her. Shiro started to notice that they seemed to be gathering towards her from the surroundings. The normal phenomenon would be that these motes would act like fireflies and hover around where there is an abundance of nutrients/life energy from nature. For so many to gather around her, Shiro wondered if her influence as the Spirit Queen had carried over to this place. However, there was a chance that this could also be wrong, as she could not access her powers. After all, she woke up in this world without anything. Hell, she was even malnourished to the point where even she took a hit from an easily predictable monster, and this hit had been bothering her for a while now, without her monstrous regeneration. It was only after almost 2 months' worth of hunting and eating did she finally regain some of her strength. In terms of appearance, she looked almost like how she did when she was on Earth, but her hair was still a little on the rough side. Without mana to reinvigorate her body and keep it in perfect condition, she had to care for it manually, and without soap or shampoo, her hair was naturally going to be damaged. "Why are you dancing around me?" Shiro asked quietly while poking the motes of light. Every poke felt cold on her fingers like they were blocks of ice, but at the same time, it was also quite soothing. Unfortunately, they couldn't answer her question. Thinking about it for a moment, Shiro wondered if there was an ambient energy similar to mana in this world. The most likely case was divinity, as there had to be something that fueled the abilities that were given to them. There was also the theory that if there was indeed an energy that fueled the abilities, could she repurpose that energy to act in a similar manner to mana? After all, if she succeeds, she could begin to use her runes such as enforce weapons, body, and maybe even cast spells, but it was unlikely as this place had its own set of rules. She had to be patient for now and wait for the Tower of Nike. She'll get most of her answers after obtaining her first divinity, as her watch continued. It was finally time for Demos' watch. Climbing down the tree carefully, Shiro shook his shoulder. Yawn, is it my watch now? Demos asked while sitting up. I've just finished mine. Shiro nodded. I see, huh? How come there are so many spirits around you? Demos asked curiously, as he had never seen so many spirits float around a single person. Normally, when you see spirits around a person, it was a mere coincidence. However, for Shiro, she was surrounded by spirits which lit her up with an ethereal light. Looking around them, he saw that there was a lack of spirits everywhere else and knew that most of them must be around Shiro right now. As they were just barely within the edge of the tower's influence, the number of spirits was a little low, but he didn't want to imagine what it would be like when they got closer. With circumflex beta, she'd be akin to a giant candle. Are you perhaps a nymph? Demos asked, as nymphs were spirits that are close to goddesses. They had a natural affinity with spirits, hence his suspicion. But for Shiro, she translated nymph into nymphomaniac. Who the *CK are you calling a nymph? Shiro asked, as she felt like a vein was about to burst from annoyance. The most she had done was hold hands. Why the *CK does he think she had an uncontrollable sex drive? Is it taboo to call women as nymphs from where you're from? Demos titled his head in confusion, as he hadn't seen Shiro like this before. Do you know what nymph means? Shiro asked with a twitching smile. Aren't they nature spirits who appear as beautiful young women? Legends has it that some nymph had even tended to some of the gods when they were young. Demos replied as Shiro paused. Understanding that there was a small misunderstanding, she coughed embarrassingly. From where I'm from, nymph has a rather different meaning. Explaining her understanding of nymph, or rather, nymphomaniac to Demos, she watched as he glanced to the side awkwardly. Sorry, I didn't know that nymph meant, well, what you told me from where you're from. I'll keep that in mind. Demos coughed. Anyways, I need to sleep now, so if you lot can be so kind as to leave for now, It'll be a little annoying to have light shining on me when I sleep," Shiro said as the lights danced around her for a little while before scattering. "What the hell? Since when can people control spirits like this?" Demos raised his eyebrow in surprise, stretching her body lightly. Shiro climbed up to the roof of the carriage. "I'll sleep here. Good night." Shiro waved and closed her eyes. "Right." Nodding his head, Demos made a small fire and started his watch. #####. Their journey towards Aegina was rather peaceful as they didn't run into any attacks that might have harmed them. On the way there, they passed by a rather sizable forest that had some monsters roaming around. After scouting a little through the day, Shiro estimated that she could hunt them without much problem and had the carriage driver take a small break so that she could get some food for them. The hunt went mostly as planned, but Shiro had to overexert herself a little, which caused her thigh wound to open up once more. After a round of berating by Demos, Shiro borrowed the carriage to reapply some of the ointment that Demos had bought for her and bandaged it up again. However, with the monster that Shiro had hunted, they were more than okay for food. Thanks to Demos' ointment, most of her smaller wounds had closed up now and didn't leave behind any scarring. Unfortunately, the wound on Shiro's thigh was rather large, so there was definitely going to be scarring. Sighing softly, Shiro wondered if this was her real body or a double that Nyx had given her. If it was her real one, she hoped that she could get rid of the scar. Looking into the distance, Shiro could see a small shift in geography. The grass had become much greener, and the trees were larger when compared to the ones that she had seen before. In front of us is the transition point between the section of night and the section of life, Demos informed as Shiro nodded her head. Despite being so far from the Tower of Gaia, the nature around this place was already being affected, and Shiro could already imagine how dense the forests were going to be the closer they got to the center. Taking a deep breath, Shiro could sense that the air was much fresher, which was also a good indication that they had reached the section of life, and Aegina was just past this forest. Due to the density of the forest, they had to take a specific path through as it would be impossible otherwise. However, they didn't need to worry too much since the monsters here weren't hostile due to the unique nature of this section. Naturally, it didn't mean that there weren't any hostile monsters. With them being so far from the tower's influence, a few monsters would be unaffected and attack them on sight. But with Shiro releasing subtle amounts of killing intent whenever a monster approaches, they were able to travel without fighting at all. After traveling for another 2 to 3 hours, the town of Aegina was finally in sight. Located just past the forest, the town was located in a deep crater of sorts and had different layers due to the nature of the crater. There were waterfalls formed by a river that flowed over one of the steep edges of the crater and into a pool at the bottom. Leading to the bottom-most part of the crater was a spiral road to make it easier for the carriages to travel in this area. Looking down at the town from above, Shiro noticed that the layout of the place was similar to that of a labyrinth of sorts. Each of the houses and alleys formed a passage of the maze. Pretty interesting place, isn't it? Demos chuckled. "It's something all right. What's that tree in the middle?" Shiro asked while pointing at the center of the town. Isolated in the lake was a small island that had a tree growing out of it. The sheer size of the tree dominated the surroundings, but it looked withered. The leaves were no longer green, and the roots looked like they could snap at any moment. That tree is kind of like a measuring device. The more abundance the nutrients in the land is, the more vibrant the tree looks. Now that the tree is withered, you can guess that the land isn't in a good condition. Demos sighed. "Is that so?" Shiro nodded her head and glanced towards the tree once more. "Anyways, the school's located on the 3rd layer, so we'll be going there to meet an old friend of mine." Taking the carriage down the spiral path, they passed quite a few houses, and Shiro could see that many of people surrounding the houses seemed rather depressed. Realizing that it must be because of the impending doom, Shiro couldn't help but shake her head. Without nutrients, the crops can't grow, and without that, they'd eventually starve. While they can try to hunt, they would need to be careful of the tower's influence. Plus, it was going to be hard to hunt enough food for everything in the town that they'd need to ration it carefully, and even then, it was unlikely that many would survive. Sooner or later, this town will become completely barren of life. As they were making their way down, a young girl knocked on their carriage door. "Beautiful miss, do you have any food?" She pleaded as Shiro felt her heartstrings being tugged. Looking back at Demos, since he had the food, Shiro was about to open her mouth when he passed her a small bag. Without her even saying anything, he already knew what she wanted to say. Taking some bread out of the bag, Shiro gave it to the girl. We don't have much on us either, but eat it quickly, okay? Or else others will try to take it from you. Shiro smiled softly. She didn't want to give the girl too much since she wouldn't be able to eat it quickly, and knowing human nature in times of need, they'll definitely try to take it from her. Thank you. Nodding her head, she quickly ate the bread. Patting the girl's head, they continued down the path. It's a sad sight, isn't it? Demos said while glancing out the window. MN really makes you wonder what caused all of this. Shiro frowned. If she found out that it was a person behind this, then she was going to make sure that they regret the fact that they haven't killed themselves yet. Seeing her furious gaze, Demos shook his head as he understood her feelings of anger. Soon, the carriage stopped as they arrived at the school. Hopping off the carriage with their luggage, they walked to the door. Compared to the school back in the last town, this one was more well-built with richer materials and glass covering the windows rather than just empty holes. Manos, are you in? Demos called out while knocking on the door. After waiting a while, they heard the sound of the door unlocking. Taking a step back, the door opened up, revealing a young man that had long black hair that was tied up loosely. Oh, it's you, Demos. Come on in. We'll talk inside. Manos sighed in relief and ushered them in. However, when he saw Shiro, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrow. She's Shiro, and she's my assistant for now. She can teach classes in my place while I sort out this problem in town. Demos explained as Manos nodded his head. Entering the school, Manos had them enter his office. Gesturing for them to take a seat, he brought out a few pieces of parchment. As I have told you before through my letter, this problem started happening a few weeks ago when people first saw signs of withering on the tree. The fishes that were in the lake have now completely died out, and all the crops have died. We're currently using rations, but we're not sure how long that can last. Without any nutrients in the land, the divinity of harvest can't do anything. Here's a report on all the signs that we've picked up, and as for locations, they're marked down on this map. Manos said while giving Demos the pieces of parchment. Furrowing his brows, Demos started to browse through all of the information given to him. From the reports, it seems like the drain of nutrients originated from the tree and slowly spread outwards. They had already tried to investigate the tree, but nothing has shown up in their investigations. All right, I'll try my best to look into this. Demos nodded his head and stored the parchment away. Thank you. You're the only one I know who could help us now. If you can't solve this, I'm afraid we'll have to move to a different town. Manos sighed. Your place of residence has been prepared. If you want, I can also get them to set up another room for your assistant. Manos said while gesturing to Shiro. That would be much appreciated. When do lessons resume? Demos asked. No idea. Hardly any of the students come to school anymore due to this. It was slightly better a few days ago, but now no one comes. Manos shook his head. All right, I suppose it can wait till this withering problem is solved. Demos nodded and stood up, gesturing for Shiro to follow him. The two left the school. Do you think there's something absorbing the nutrients? Shiro asked. What makes you think that? Well, think of it like this. If you have a bowl of water representing the nutrients in the land, and you poke a hole in the middle, it'll drain outwards. Which is like what's happening here. Meaning, there might be something absorbing it from the tree. While they have investigated the tree and found nothing, I'm thinking the culprit hid the source of the problem exceptionally well. Shiro explained, as Demos nodded his head. That is what I believe as well, hence why we're going to look at the tree first. Walking towards the tree located at the very bottom of the crater, Shiro couldn't help but feel a little stuffy. It was as if there was a lack of air for her to breathe. Say, sir, are you noticing the lack of air? Shiro asked as she tried her best to regulate her breaths. What do you mean? Demos frowned when he noticed Shiro's abnormal condition. Just realizing that for some ungodly reason, I am having a hard time to breathe. Shiro replied jokingly, but took a moment to try to catch her breath. If you want, we can take a break. Demos furrowed his brows. No, it's fine. I think I'm good now. Shiro replied with a small wave of her hand. Okay, if it gets worse, tell me and we'll stop for a while. Nodding her head, Shiro continued to walk further down into the crater. Every step felt heavy, but it wasn't like the feeling she had during her ascension of the staircase on Mount Olympus. This time it was heavy due to her body feeling extremely weak. Her head was hurting and sweat could be seen dripping from her face. Feeling a slight numbness spreading across her body, Shiro knew that there was something wrong with the tree. The closer she got to it, the weaker she felt. "I think I'll stop here," Shiro said while struggling for breath. "I can see that. Let's go back first then. Maybe you're just not feeling well from traveling." Demos frowned and helped her walk back. Up the path, unfortunately for Shiro, even when she was walking away from the tree, her body continued to deteriorate. By the time they arrived at the school again, Shiro was already on the verge of collapsing. Laying the bed that had been prepared, Shiro gritted her teeth from the pain. Curling up into a fetal position, she clutched the area near her heart as it felt like it was about to burst. With her abnormal condition, Demos had quickly called for a medic, but they had reported that her condition was strange even to him. Dismissing the medic, Demos waited in the room anxiously as Shiro's condition continued to deteriorate. Time passed as the sun eventually set. Thankfully, Shiro's breathing started to stabilize as her body relaxed slightly. Her face was still pale, but she was no longer in pain. "What happened?" Shiro asked, slowly opening her eyes. She could see Demos' worried gaze. "Don't move. Your body is still weak," he reminded. "Amen." Nodding her head, Shiro sighed and enjoyed the feeling of being able to breathe once more. The hell was that? She thought to herself as she had never suffered something like that before. "So do you know what happened, or is this new to you as well?" Demos asked. "Well, if I knew I was going to almost die the moment I got close to the tree, I wouldn't have walked up to it now, would I?" Shiro chuckled while sitting up. "Amen. Do you think that it's something to do with your constitution? You have a bunch of spirits circling around you all the time when night falls after all. And speaking of which, I don't see any spirits around here," Demos said while glancing out of the window. Normally, spirits would be abundant in this section of life, especially since the forest is just outside of this crater town. However, not a single speck could be seen. Thinking about it for a moment, Shiro wondered if it was because her body was technically that of a spirit's. Humans could walk up to the tree while she couldn't due to the fact that she was a spirit. There must be something at the tree which drains the land and acts like poison to spirits. Otherwise, it wouldn't explain why there is a lack of spirits around this town. Shiro thought with a frown. "Maybe, but unless I find a solution for this, I don't think it's wise for me to approach the tree." Shiro sighed. "Amen. Thankfully this place is close to the top, so it shouldn't affect you too much. But if it does, tell me, okay? I will, don't worry. I'll go out of the town for some fresh air if that's okay," Shiro said while standing up. "Can you handle it?" Demos asked as he was still worried about her current state. "Don't worry, I'll be right back. I'm just going out for some fresh air." Shiro smiled and left the building. Making her way out of the town, she saw on the edge of the crater and took a deep breath before sighing. Narrowing her eyes at the tree, she wondered what else she didn't know about her current body that so far. She knew that most of her powers were sealed away and she couldn't use them. However, her passive influence over spirits were still active, so that means she was still physically a spirit. Reinoya, therefore, whatever is harmful to a spirit is harmful to her. Glancing back at the forest, she spotted a few stray motes of light. Noticing that they seemed to want to come closer to her, but hesitated, Shiro wondered if it was because of the tree in the crater. Standing up, she walked closer to the spirits. "Are you afraid of the tree in the crater?" Shiro asked with a soft smile. Seemingly unable to answer her question, the Modon danced around her before floating into the forest. Raising her eyebrow, Shiro shrugged her shoulder and was about to go back when the spirit appeared once more. Guessing that it wanted her to follow it, Shiro debated for a moment before following the spirit. Drawing her sword, she kept herself on guard in case anything appeared that may harm her. Venturing deeper into the forest, more and more spirits started to appear as Shiro felt rather invigorated. This was a completely different feeling she had when compared to the tree in the crater. Looking down, she pulled her skirt up and could see her thigh wound healing very slowly, but it was already much faster than what it should be. Strange, Shiro thought to herself and continued to follow the spirits. It was unknown how long she had walked for, but her thigh wound had already healed by 20%. That at this point, spirits were now in abundance. dancing around her like cheerful children. They seemed to urge her to follow them faster. Climbing over a few large tree roots, Shiro noticed that the trees and plants around their current location were much bigger than what had been seen in the forest before. Making her way past some trees, she found herself in a small clearing of sorts. There was a single tree that had a small pond next to it. The large roots of the tree formed a cage of sorts, and one of the larger roots acted like a small bridge. On the bridge sat a woman who seemed to have a dress made from the tree roots and vines. She had long blonde hair which was brown on the edges and green eyes. Smiling at Shiro, the woman crossed her legs and smiled. "I've never seen a young spirit already taking a human form," she said while gesturing to the small motes of light. "And I've never personally seen a dryad before." Shiro chuckled since the woman in front of her matches the description of dryad. In her mind, "You know of my kind? Interesting. I am indeed a dryad, and you're a young spirit who has attained a human form without any source of divinity. Perhaps that is why these younglings are attracted by you." The dryad smiled and tapped one of the motes of light. "Why have they brought me here?" Shiro asked. "Because you were tainted and almost died." Tainted. The tree in the bottom of the crater has been tampered with. I had wanted the spirits to call you here sooner, but it's rather hard for them to appear before you in the day, so they had to wait. Thankfully, you left the town, which gave them a chance to call out for you. If not, you would have continued to stay near the corrosion without any kind of protection, which would have resulted in your death. I would have given it 2 days before you died. Unlike you, the younger spirits are much more susceptible to the corrosion, so the moment they enter the town, their life would have been extinguished. The dryad shook her head. "So why did you want to call me over here?" Shiro asked, as there was no way a dryad would call her here for nothing. "I just wanted to call you here and warn you about the town. You should stay near me for a while so that my divinity can heal you, and then you can leave. The town is lost." Surprised at the fact that the dryad didn't call her here for anything other than a warning, Shiro raised her eyebrow. "The town is lost. Is there no way to fix it?" Shiro asked. "Nope. The one who caused this had brought a dread sapling from the null area and planted it inside the tree. The dread sapling will continue to drain the land of its nutrients until the area becomes the same as the null area." The dryad shook her head. "What do you mean by null area and dread sapling?" Both of these terms were unfamiliar to Shiro, and they meant nothing to her right now. The null area is the area outside of the sections. It is completely devoid of life, and nothing can survive there. As for the dread sapling, it's something that has been in the null area for a long time. While it may not be harmful to humans, it's extremely dangerous to nature, spirits, and monsters as it drains your vitality. When I said that you were tainted, it was because you had inhaled the air that was produced by the dread sapling. It will eat away at you from the inside until you die. I'm sure you felt it, but your heart should have felt like it was going to burst, right? That's the effects of this air that you breathed." The dryad narrowed her eyes as Shiro couldn't help but frown at the thought. "There has to be a way to solve this, right?" Shiro asked with furrowed brows. "There might be, but I don't know the solution. Just leave this place. The longer you stay, the more dangerous it becomes for you. After a certain point, not even I can heal you with my divinity." The dryad shook her head, waving her hand. Roots wrapped around her, and she disappeared from the area. Staying silent for a moment, Shiro started to walk back to the town. Walking through the forest, Shiro decided to wait for a short while so that her wounds fully healed up before leaving. That way, should anything happen, she'll be ready to fight them. Sitting on one of the trees while waiting for her wound to heal, Shiro looked towards the town with a frown. If even the air that she breathes is poisonous to her current body, then she's not able to stay in the town for long. Sighing softly, she wondered how she could solve this. Since the dryad said that she had no idea, it could imply that she required someone with more knowledge on the null area and the dread sapling. There was also the problem of a culprit planting such an ominous sapling here in the first place. What? Are there motives? What do they gain from this? Why did it have to be this town? These were the questions that she needed answers to. While she was waiting for her wounds to recover, she played around with the spirits that had gathered around her, which brought up another question, or rather, a thought in Shiro's mind. The fact that she was essentially the same as these spirits without a divinity. The dryad mentioned that she had never seen a young spirit without divinity attain a human body, which meant that some of her power could be sealed away due to this lack of divinity. Once she gets her first one, Some features of her race may appear once more, but it was unconfirmed. During this, Shiro noticed a small call in the distance. Focusing her mind on the call, she recognized it to be Deimos' voice, and he was calling for her with some worry in his voice. Smiling softly, she glanced down at her thigh wound and saw that it had mostly closed up now. If she was to stay for another hour, it would heal, but she should tell him that first, or else he'll be looking around for her constantly. Hopping off the tree, Shiro jogged over to the edge. With the spirits following her, it wasn't hard for Deimos to spot her. Where were you? You had me worried when you didn't come back for a few hours. Deimos sighed. I happened to meet a dryad when I was taking a break. I have also found out more about myself and the cause of everything that's happened. Shiro smiled while poking a few of the spirits. Oh, that's good then. So do you know why you were in pain earlier? Deimos asked with worry. Amen. It's something to do with my constitution and the tree. It turns out that someone has planted something called a dread sapling into the tree, and the air that it produces is highly poisonous to me. I don't think I can stay in the town, since the longer I stay, the more likely it is for me to just die. Shiro shook her head. Staying silent, Deimos had a frown on his face. I know what a dread sapling is, and seeing as though it's poisonous to you, I think I know why. You're a spirit, aren't you? A rather young one at that. That probably explains why the spirits are attracted to you. However, I haven't heard of young spirits gaining human bodies like you have without divinity. Young spirits are extremely weak to the dread sapling, while older spirits have some resistance against it, but it still harms them. For you to have such an adverse reaction by just approaching the tree means that you're young and the dread sapling has already matured to stage 2. That explains the lack of nutrients. Deimos frowned. Emin, can you explain to me more about the dread sapling? Shiro asked, as it sounded like Deimos knew what was happening. Yes, though I doubt you'd want to go back to the town, seeing as though it's highly poisonous to you at this moment in time. Deimos said whilst glancing back at the town. Let's go into the forest. The dryad's divinity in the forest increases my natural recovery. See, even my thigh wound is almost gone, Shiro said while pulling up her skirt a little so that Deimos could see the almost healed wound. However, before she could show him, Deimos immediately turned his head away. A lady shouldn't go around lifting her skirt like that. Deimos coughed. What? It's just to show you a wound. Shiro tilted her head. It has different implications. What do why? Realizing what he meant, Shiro let go of the edge of her skirt and coughed. Well, just know that the wound had almost healed up. If I stay in the forest for another hour or so, I should be back in peak form. She explained. All right, let's go then. Deimos nodded. Walking further into the forest, Shiro sat down on a large branch while Deimos sat on a tree root. So the dread sapling is something that can be found in the outside area of this world that I told you about. As you can guess, it's called the null area because nothing can survive there. The same goes with the dread sapling. While the sapling itself may survive, it cannot bloom. I was one of the people who found out about the consequences of letting the dread sapling bloom, Deimos said as he glanced down at his hands and balled them into a fist. No, yes, there are 4 stages to a dread sapling's life. The first stage is where it infects a host of sorts, preferably a tree of high vitality in an area where nutrients are abundant. The second stage is feeding like you see in the town. Using the host, the dread sapling will begin to feed off on all the nutrients in the area until it has gathered enough to step into the next stage of growth. Some of us that ventured into the null area believe that the dread sapling was one of the main causes to the place becoming barren. With the saplings absorbing all the nutrients greedily, there's no wonder that no life can be sustained. The third stage is blooming, and that's when the host is completely discarded and the sapling shows its true form. In this stage, it gives up on being sneaky when draining the surroundings. Black roots will explode out of the ground and seek out anything that has an ounce of life in it and drain it completely dry. Think of its power as similar to the nature near the Tower of Gaia, but it doesn't care if you have killed or not. All it desires is nutrients. The fourth and last stage is something that we haven't witnessed in its entirety, but we're glad we didn't, since then we could have destroyed a large part of the world. The fourth stage is what we like to call colony, since, as the name suggests, the dread sapling would attempt to create more by spreading its offspring through the wind and into the other parts of the world to allow them to grow. It is theorized that once a certain amount of these saplings reaches the third stage, a network would be constructed between them and the draining force of the nutrients will spread all over the world. We were able to stop it during the fourth stage thanks to a few people that had obtained 3 powerful divinities, but in the process, their lives were lost. Demos said with a deep sigh. What can we do to stop it in its current stage then? Shiro asked, as it wasn't too keen on waiting for the sapling to bloom. To stop it in its current stage, we'll need much more manpower than what we currently have. It's not something that I can deal with alone without some sacrifices. Demos shook his head. Then how long would it take for us to get the required manpower? Shiro asked. I don't know. I'll need to spread the news, but by the time I've done that, there's a likely chance of the sapling reaching the third stage, and by then, we'll need even more reinforcements. Demos shook his head. Damn, if we did have enough manpower, what would we need to do? Shiro asked. We'll need to completely extract the sapling from its host. During the extraction process, the sapling will forcefully enter a pseudo-stage 3, where it will use its roots to attack its assailants and try to drain them of their nutrients. But that's not it. Once we extract it, we'll need to completely incinerate the sapling with fire so that it can't heal itself with the nutrients that it's gathered. Someone with Apollo's fire divinity would be very helpful during this. Demos replied. So is there nothing we can do right now? Shiro frowned. Unfortunately, no. The best we can do is prepare enough manpower for when it reaches stage 3. We'll need to completely evacuate the town and send out a warning to the cities so that they can dispatch some people with the required divinities. Hearing this, Shiro frowned at their helplessness. If she still had her power from Earth, she could have easily dealt with the sapling. There was also the problem of who put the sapling there. Narrowing her eyes, she tried to think of a way to solve this, when an idea appeared in her mind. Say, have you ever tried to douse the dread sapling with boiling water or vinegar? Shiro asked. We have tried boiling water, but it seems resistant to it. Demos replied. As for vinegar, why would you use a food preservative? Plus, it's also used to tend wounds, so I don't see any point of pouring vinegar on the sapling. He shook his head. You see, there is something called a herbicide, and while I haven't researched about herbicides that preserve the environment, I do know ones that damage it. They mostly involve using salt, boiling water, some dish soap, or vinegar which contains acetic acid. They're extremely helpful in killing plant life, so I'm thinking if we were to recreate a herbicide using divinities, we should be able to kill the dread sapling. The only problem with this is that it'll damage the surrounding plant life. However, seeing as though it's already draining the surroundings, I don't see why we shouldn't use this method. Shiro explained with a smile. I don't understand what you mean by herbicide, so care to explain how it works? Demos asked. He was curious about where she got this knowledge, but he didn't care right now. The most important task right now is to deal with the sapling. It's just something that's designed to kill plants. It takes a while to produce, but if we have people with divinities pertaining harvest and inducing growth in certain organisms, then we might be able to create some of this to kill the sapling. Shiro smiled. I'm interested, young spirit. Can you show me a demonstration of this herbicide that you speak of? I may be able to find some spirits to help you in this cause. The dryad smiled softly as she appeared next to Shiro. So you've been watching? Sure, I'll show you, but it takes a bit of time and effort to make the second one. We can either let it kill the sapling on its own, or we can ignite it and cause a giant fire. The only problem with igniting it is that there's a high chance that the town will be destroyed with how much we may need. Shiro explained. That's rather extreme. Demos raised his eyebrow. Well, it's a magical plant that can destroy the world. I'm not sure a homemade herbicide can kill it easily. Shiro shrugged. Are you able to get me some salt and boiling water? Shiro asked as Demos shook his head. Salt is extremely expensive, and if you're thinking about getting a lot to kill the sapling, I'm afraid it'll cost a fortune, which is something we don't have. He sighed. All right, salt is expensive when you can't harvest a lot of it. Shiro muttered with a frown. That's fine. We'll have to go with the acid route or the explosion route then. The second one will need someone with a fire divinity so that I can make sure the explosion is magical just in case the dread sapling is resistant to non-magical methods. For the acid route, we'll be needing a lot of vinegar since it contains acetic acid. Unfortunately, it only contains around 5 to 6%, and I didn't read up on how to make acetic acid, which is annoying. But that is enough to kill most plants, so if we magical it up with some harvest divinity, it should heavily damage the sapling and hopefully kill it. If not, we'll go with the explosion route. We'll need to shred a lot of wood finely into dust and have someone with the wind divinity to spread it to the crater. Once that happens, the person with the fire divinity should send a fireball or something into it, and it'll react like a giant bomb, blowing up the place and the sapling with it. And if it still doesn't die, then we should probably just go into combat, as it should be heavily damaged at that point. Shiro explained. How would dust cause an explosion? I know it sets on fire, but I don't see why it would explode. The dryad furrowed her brows. Think of it like this. A large piece of wood burns over time, right? Shiro smiled. Yes. If you reduce that piece of wood, the time to burn decreases, right? Yes, it does. If I shred wood into fine grains of dust, it takes an instant for it to catch on fire and burn up, right? Shiro grinned at this point. Demos understood what she was leading up to and couldn't help but widen his eyes at the consequences of such actions should it be performed at a large scale. If we fill up the entire crater town with tiny grains of wood dust that floats through the air thanks to the person with a wind divinity, a single speck of fire would cause the entire place to explode, as each grain will set each other on fire in an instant. If you send a large fireball in, the explosion would be amplified, causing a massive amount of damage to the surroundings and likewise, the dread sapling itself. In other words, rather than damaging the wood over time when it is a large piece, shredding it to pieces allows for all the burning to take place in a single moment, hence its power. Shiro chuckled as the dryad stayed silent. Where did you even get this knowledge? If it was used in a war, it could cause mass amounts of damage to the enemy army. Demos frowned. Don't worry. This was something I found written by an unknown person who had already died. If this knowledge was to spread, do you think no one would have tried to use it? Shiro smiled. But if you use it now, this knowledge will become common and conflicts will escalate in collateral damage. Hence why we'll need to find trustworthy people to carry this plan out. Plus, it's only a backup plan in case the acid route doesn't work. Shiro shrugged. You seem to have forgotten an important point. The dryad shook her head. And that is, what do you think would happen to everyone who will lose their homes regardless of which method you use? The dryad asked as Shiro stayed silent, the moment where her main problem was taking care of the dread sapling. She had forgotten about the consequences that her actions could bring. Her main goal for this was to help the people to begin with, but if she used such violent methods, the town would be destroyed anyways. The acid route would destroy the land, making it hard to grow crops, while the explosion could completely reform the area, destroying all of their homes in the process. Both options would bring about the same result as the dread sapling. Frowning slightly, Shiro stayed silent as she may need to reconsider her choices. This kind of thing had happened before, but her family and friends had always taken care of the aftermath for her. Examples would be what happened in Tokyo and what happened to their family mansion. How about I go talk to the leader of the town and inform him of the options? I'll need to do some research on the tree to determine how close the sapling is to the next stage. If we have time, I'll be able to call for some reinforcements so that we can kill it now without harming the town too much. If it's close to the third stage, I'll have to call more reinforcements, and if they can't deal with it, we'll go with your plan, okay? Demos smiled and patted Shiro's shoulder. Amen. I'll rest in the forest since it's good for me, and I'm already used to it. You should head back to the town. Shiro nodded as she wanted some time to think by herself. She needed to remember that her methods were too violent, and that the consequences of her actions may or may not cause more harm than the problem she's trying to solve. It'll be akin to fighting fire with fire, and the result is everything turning to ash. Well, don't worry about it too much and rest well for tonight. I'll bring you some breakfast tomorrow since you can't enter town with the sapling trying to kill you. Demos chuckled and made his way back to town. Watching his figure walking away in the distance, Shiro stayed silent and sighed. Standing up on her branch, she jumped down and made her way deeper into the forest so that she could find a proper branch to sleep on.